Hello and welcome to the second session of today's weekly web chat with Vision 33. Gregory Dick is going to be presenting the fourth and final section of the inventory core training session for SAP Business One. So without any more delay, let's get Gregory started. It's all yours, Gregory.
Thank you. So, as Dean said, this is the last of our inventory sessions. We've already covered the overview of the inventory process, setting up inventories, serializations and batches, warehouse management, and then earlier today, pick and pack and setting up prices. So the final session is on MRP. So what is MRP? Material replacement planning is the most generic set of planning techniques that use bill of materials data, inventory data, and supply inputs from scheduled production and purchase orders, as well as demand inputs from actual and forecasted orders to calculate material requirements for make or bought items. After MRP is run, the system gives you a recommendation for production orders or purchase orders to fulfill your requirements. The MRP process step includes define the planning data to be used in MRP. One key planning data is your forecast. Run the MRP wizard. Review the order recommendations resulting from the MRP run. And from there, you create either production orders or purchase orders as needed. Okay, so here's a graphic overview of the plan. We've got our master data that overlies everything. And from there, we do purchasing, inbound logistics, warehouse management and production, and the outbound logistics, and marketing, sales, and service. So define the planning data based on forecasts and past purchases. You run the MRP, view the order recommendations, and then from there you generate production orders or purchase orders. True requirements planning production scenario. The current state of inventory is modeled through the levels of items on hand in each warehouse, supplemented by items that are already on the way through purchase orders or production orders. The current state of demand is modeled through open sales orders, minimum inventory levels, open production orders, and forecasts. Entire categories of demand can be included or excluded. For example, an MRP run can be configured to look at only at sales orders and ignore forecasts. Or alternately, it can have actual orders consume forecasted quantities to avoid inflating inventory. And then the result of the MRP run is a suggested set of purchase orders or production orders. These suggested purchase and production orders can be converted easily to actual orders. If enough materials are not going to be on hand in time, the MRP run signals when a required quantity will not meet the due date based on lead times. The recommendation report highlights recommended purchases or production reports that are past due. The MRP run does not suggest whether it would be better to delay the date which the sales order will be delivered or attempt to run rush the arrival of the needed items. So it doesn't make it a value judgment on what happens if things are going to be late. As materials move in and out of inventory and products are produced, financial accounting of all of it happens automatically because of the way each item, purchase order, or production orders are linked automatically to the relevant accounts through the account determination recorded in master data. So let's take a look at the scenario. There is a requirement for 10 printers on a sales order. The printers are a produced item, so you make them. The boards, printers, printer heads, and power packs are purchased. So if you run the MRP, we'll create recommendations for production order for 10 printers, and it will make purchase orders for 10 printer heads, 20 memory boards, because 2 are required for each printer, and 10 power packs. Inventory planning scenarios before and after. MRP considers existing stock, sales forecast, and existing purchase production orders. For example, in the graphic above, or in the graphic we're going to see below, for the MRP run, there are 20 pieces of purchased items in stock. Additionally, there will be receipt of 30 items from an existing purchase order. The requirements are 40 pieces, which will be needed in the existing sales order. It is planned for the sales forecast of 50 pieces, and at a later time, 30 pieces will be needed. After the MRP run, recommendations for purchasing orders will have been generated to fulfill the requirements. MRP considers the existing stock, existing purchase orders, production orders, and sales orders. In the item master record, you can use procurement method field in the planning data tab to define whether you make the item or buy the item. So here's our scenario. We have 20 pieces in stock. We have a sales order that comes in for 40 pieces. However, we already have a purchase order for 30 pieces, which would bring our total up to 50. Sales forecast says 50 pieces, and there's additional sales forecasts later on for 30 pieces. So what MRP will do is it will take a look at the stock. There's already, we have 20, we need 40, so it will request another 20. And we've got our purchase order of 30. We have our sales forecast of 50, so it'll create another purchase order of another 20 pieces. And then our future sales forecast is 30 pieces. We'll create a PO for that as well. Key planning data. There are 3 kinds of master data that represent the core of the MRP process. The bill of materials specifies the items used to produce a manufactured item. The item data specifies the lead time in which it takes to acquire each item. And the inventory data represents how much of each item is on hand. In addition, MRP uses forecasts as an additional source for the requirements. So first off, the bill of materials lists all items used as input into a production process. The items in the bill of materials can refer to items that are purchased or made, and made items must have their own bill of materials, which may include other made items and so on. An MRP run starts with the products in all of the open sales orders, production orders, forecasts, and then in inventory levels, and then traverses the relevant bills of materials to see if all required items will be available when needed. The item master data, the lead time field in the planning data tab of the item master data window is one of the most important fields to specify correctly because the accuracy and usefulness of the MRP run is governed by this data. Lead time indicates how long it takes for a purchase item to arrive after it is ordered. For manufactured items, lead time indicates how long it takes to manufacture an item. The inventory data represents how much inventory is currently on hand, and the forecasts, SAP Business One uses forecasts information in the MRP run as an additional source of requirements. It's not necessary to have your forecasts in, but it does refine your MRP requirements. So let's take a look at the item master, the bill of materials, the inventory data, and the sales forecasts. Okay, so let's look at our inventory master, and you'll see under planning data, you can define whether you want to have it run as MRP or not. There are some items where you may decide you do not want to have automatic replenishment, so you can remove it from the MRP runs. Procurement method determines whether you want to buy it to create a purchase order or make it to create a production order. We don't have any order intervals set up. You can define order intervals to be ordered weekly, etc. Order multiples. is if, for instance, an item always comes in a 4-pack, although you use them individually, then you could put in an item order multiples of 4 so that each increment will be based on 4. So if you need 2, it'll create order 4. If you need 5, it'll order 8, etc. You can also set minimum order quantity. So based on price discounts, etc., you can say I always want to order a minimum of 12 items whenever I create an order. The lead time is, as mentioned, a very important field. For purchased items, it's how long is it going to take to get it actually into your warehouse. This affects when items are ordered. MRP is essentially a just-in-time inventory process. So if it takes 10 days to order and you're 20 days out, it's not going to order it now. It will wait for 10 days so that it comes in at the appropriate time. And then the tolerance days is a variable for plus or minus factor of the lead time in helping to determine when things can be ordered. Another important field here is the minimum inventory field. In this case, we don't have it set up. However, if you have determined that you always want at least 3 on hand, then it will make sure whenever it's doing your MRP that it will check and say, okay, we need at least 3, so that will become another factor in determining what needs to be ordered. For bill of materials, here, we can see there are various pieces that are used to create the bill of materials. And if we go into any one of these pieces, we'll see that each of those, of course, has its own purchase process and lead times if they're set up. And in the actual bill of materials itself, you can also set up your lead time in order to determine how long it takes to actually create the item. So we looked at the item master data, bill of materials, and sales forecast. So in this case, we have an item number, MRP item number 3, the start date. Let's set that to 2013. And set that to 14. So we can see here we've got for November the 15th, we have a requirement of 50. And then for December 15th, now I've got this set up for intervals for days. You can change the view. Here you can modify increase the quantities required. Planning data in the item master. Planning method, we've already discussed this, MRP, to plan the procurement of the item. None, the item procurement is not planned, and no production orders or purchase order recommendations are created for the item. That is an item that requires manual purchase orders. Procurement method, make to generate a production order, and to buy to generate a purchase order. Order intervals, choose one of the values to define the time intervals between different orders. You can choose define new to open define order intervals and to enter the name and frequency of the interval. Order multiples, enter the numeric value to define the size of the lot. For example, if a value of 12 orders multiples of 12, it can be 20 and require 24. Minimum order quantity is the minimum lot size. Lead time is the number of days to calculate for the duration of time to produce or receive the product. You can also define planning data in item groups, administration setup. Item groups, this information copies automatically to the item master data by default. Let's take a quick look at that. So with each item group that is assigned to, every item is assigned to an item group, and you can have your defaults here to be by MRP, by, and lead time, so let's have 2, and your default valuation method. And you can also set up default bin locations. So let's update this, and it's going to update every item in that group to put in a lead time of 2 days. So we've already looked at this item master. We've got the planning method, the procurement method, intervals, order multiples, and minimum stock quantities. So lead time. You can maintain the lead time in the item master record on the planning data tab. This is the number of days to calculate how long it takes to produce an item. In the graphic below, it takes 10 days to produce a printer. The lead time is 10 days. That means that the memory board, printer heads, and power packs have to be available 10 working days before the printer is due. There's a sales order to be delivered on the 11th. MRP, or sorry, on 30/11, MRP planning is scheduled backwards from 30/11 on, considering weekends and non-working days. The result of the MRP requirement for the components for the printer, they are recommended for purchase orders so that they can be purchased and available for 6/11. You can choose in the MRP scenario details if non-working days should be considered. We'll take a look at that. So we can consider holidays. You can select and define your holidays and weekends. Holidays details can be set up under administration, system initialization, company details, and the number of holidays and weekends increases the lead time intervals for MRP calculations. So here's our printer with the 10-day lead time. In order to have a purchase order for the components, it has to come in on the 16th. Because there's 10 days of lead time to actually create the production order, it'll be available on the 30th. Bill of materials. The production bill of materials represents an item to be produced. The sub-items in the bill of materials are items that will be needed to produce the top-level item. The sub-items can either be items that are purchased or made. These are typical physical items that are stored in inventory. However, a labor item can be added to a bill of materials to represent labor in the production process. Some MRP applications have what's called routing, which is a description of the path items take through labor and production process as they're being manufactured. SAP Business One has a simplified MRP process that does not model production capacity. Labor costs, however, can be accounted for. To get the total cost of production for producing an item, you must enter a special item used to represent labor costs, in addition to entering all the items for the bill of material. A bill of material can contain items that are bills of material themselves. One core feature of MRP functionality of SAP Business One is the way that it analyzes a multi-level bill of materials in which one bill of material refers to another bill of material, which could refer to still more. The challenge is to make sure that every item needed is available soon enough so that components can be made far enough in advance to meet the schedule for highest level items that are included. With complex products, bills of material can cascade through several levels. When you run MRP, the system generates requirements for the highest bill of materials level according to sales orders and forecast demands. Furthermore, it calculates requirements of the lower bill of material levels according to demands through the bill of materials explosion. So we've got a printer, represents an item to be produced. The top level has an item number. All components are actual items, not bills of material, but it can be multi-level. So let's just pop back to SAP again. Just take a quick look at bills of materials again. We've got an MRP. Okay, so this is one specifically for MRP, in which we've got two child items. MRP child item number 1 is in fact another bill of material that is made up of MRP grandchild, which is an item. Now we can see here for this item, it's got a lead time of 2 days, no minimum order quantity, and it's a purchased item. Let's get rid of this one and then take a look at, sorry, let's do this again. And we can see here that there's also a lead time of 2 days to make this from the grandchild item. So it takes 2 days to get the grandchild item in, and then 2 days to make this. So there we have at least 4 days of lead time. And if we go back to lead MRP, and there is no lead time, so that would mean that in order to produce this, we have 4 days of lead time. Defining forecasts. You can create forecasts to plan purchases and production in advance, even before you receive actual sales orders. You may receive sales orders at short notice. However, lead time to manufacture the product is long in most cases. Therefore, you produce the products for the forecast, and when the actual sales orders arrive, you're able to supply the goods at short notice. You can also define in the general settings that sales forecasts are consumed by actual sales orders. So this means that if you have a forecast of 20 for this month, every time you get a sales order, it subtracts from that 20. So if we have sales orders come in on the first of the month for 10 items, then the forecast will be diminished from 20 down to 10. And forecast can be maintained by item. Enter start and end date to define a forecast horizon. The current date displays by default. You can update the fields after you save the forecast. You manage forecasts on a daily, weekly, or monthly basis. When you create a new forecast, select the appropriate view. You cannot change the view once you have saved the forecast. If you remember when we were looking at the daily forecast, it was the view was grayed out. In addition, you can create several forecasts. However, you select only one forecast for each MRP scenario. So that's an important fact. You can have multiple forecasts to cover different areas, but when you're doing MRP, you can only select a single forecast. So if you've got a forecast that only covers a range of items, then you want to make sure that when you run that MRP for that forecast, you only run the MRP for that range of items. So this is a look at a forecast, 50 pieces for This is monthly, so for September, 50 pieces, October, 40 pieces, November, 20 pieces, and December, 60 pieces for Christmas. So let's take a look at our forecast. So we're going to add a forecast this time, and we're going to call it printer. And start date is today and go to the end of the year, and we're going to have it monthly. So now what I can do is enter my various printers. And I'm going to determine how many I'm going to sell in each month. Etc. Oh, I should push that button first so I can actually automatically create this. Printers. Of course, I remove my quantities. Oops. Etc. So now, if we go find, there's our forecast. Now, since we did forecast the remaining 4 items, they just dropped off the list. MRP analysis, start consuming the forecast. Let's go back and show where you can set up in administration how your forecasts are consumed. And that was the general settings. Here you can decide whether your forecasts are consumed or not, and how they're for the consumption method, whether it's oldest to newest, or it goes backwards. Takes what's forecast in the future and it goes backwards. And this is the range in which you can look backwards and forwards. So if you've got a forecast from 2 weeks ago, and you're doing it backwards to forwards, it's not going to get picked up because this only goes back 7 days. So if you're doing monthly forecast, you wouldn't want this set at 7 days because once you get past the 8th of the month, it won't be using up your forecast. So these numbers here are largely dependent on how you set up your forecast, whether it's daily, weekly, or monthly. So MRP analysis looks backwards from the due date of an order, starting with the lead time of the item sales order, and then calculating all of the other lead times in the bill of materials for components to determine whether all materials can be obtained on time, which is what we did with the MRP example we had. MRP analysis also reaches forward to reduce forecasted quantities so inventory does not unintentionally get too high. Excess inventory sometimes builds up after companies prepare annual, quarterly, or monthly forecasts for the number of units they plan to ship in order to avoid stock shortages and maintain on-time delivery. If a company plans production based on forecasted quantities and then adds actual order quantities to the forecast, production may exceed the actual needs and the inventory will be inflated. To avoid this situation, SAP Business One can reduce forecasted quantities by actual order quantities. As a result, only the net forecasted quantity, forecast minus the order quantity, is added to the MRP. The capacity of the MRP functionality for SAP Business One is important because forecasts are considered sources of demand for MRP. This means that if you make a forecast for orders for 50 units to come in during a certain period, MRP treats the forecast as actual orders, generates production orders, so the items can be ready when needed. Continuing with this example, assuming that actual orders for 10 units come in, now MRP will adjust the forecast down by 10 units in order to avoid buildup of excess inventory. You can get the default for whatever sales orders are consumed by the forecast in the general settings, but it can be changed at a row level on the sales order. So here's our consuming forecast. For printer, we have a forecast of 40. Our sales forecast shows the original 50. Sales order is created for 10 on July 25th. Forecast is reduced by 10 to account for the sales order. The production order will be created for 50 printers. MRP configuration settings. MRP defaults for consuming sales orders are set in the General Settings Inventory tab. Set the defaults for whether sales orders are consumed in the forecast. Consumption methods allow you to choose between back forward or forward back. These methods determine which order system searches for existing forecast closes to sales orders due date. First method, backwards forward, system searches previous periods of time up to the first day of the required range, defined in days backwards. If no forecast is found, or the forecast is insufficient, the system then searches ahead, starting from the sales order due date. Second method, backward forward backward, begins with the sales order due up to the last date of the required range, as defined in the days forward. If no forecast is found or is insufficient, then the system searches backwards, starting from the due date. Days forward and backwards simply specify the number of days for the system to search. MRP defaults for item groups are set in Administration, Setup, Inventory, Item Groups, General tab. And we've looked at that already where we can set the lead days. These defaults can be overridden on Item Master. So, setting and consuming forecasts in the General tab, consume the forecast, the consumption method, and define MRP defaults for item groups are set up in inventory, planning MRP, procurement methods, order intervals, order multiples, lead times. So let's take a look at MRP screen at this point. Take a look at defining MRP scenario. So let's first of all just go take a look at what an MRP screen looks like. So it's run by a wizard. Here we've got several scenarios already created with start dates, end dates, last time they were updated, who updated them, and the last date it was executed. In this case, we're just taking an existing scenario, and we'll go through what all these fields mean. So to begin the process of an MRP run, you select the MRP wizard, which presents a welcome screen, which you can actually, there's a flag to turn that off. Each scenario defines the scope of the MRP run. SAP Business One enables you to create a new MRP scenario or to choose an existing one. For a new scenario, enter its name and description. As for existing ones, select the scenario from the list. The next window in the wizard is the scenario details. In that window, you can define the parameters of your scenario, such as planning horizon and item details. You can choose simulation if you only want to simulate an MRP scenario. In this case, you would not be able to save or release recommendations. And lastly, you choose your display preference. So actually, let's create a new scenario. So we can go to the, create a new scenario. So we have to set it up. And start date. For your planning horizon. Now, a cautionary note here. When setting up your start and end dates, you have to be very cognizant of what your start date is. If you are in a situation where you often have purchase orders that remain unfulfilled or partially filled over a long period of time, then if you set your start date too close to current, then those orders are going to get dropped and they will be reordered. For example, let's say we have a purchase order that went in on March 1st, and on March 3rd it was partially fulfilled. So instead of, we had the order 20 items and 10 came in on the 3rd, the other 10 are back ordered. If we run this scenario now, it's not going to, it will basically create a new MRP without consideration of your purchase order from March 1st because it's outside of the date range. So if we want to include that, we'd have to go back to here. Now that item, that back order of 10 items would be considered when putting the scenario together. So it depends on your business, but if you do have a budget, if you do have purchase orders that remain open for a long period of time, then you want to put the start date back fairly far. The view period, we can take a look at it by weeks. So we can either see every day, every week, etc., or every month. Let's actually stick with days. Holiday considerations. If you have your holiday calendar set up, then this will, if you click these two boxes, then weekends and holidays will be ignored. If you don't click them, then they will be considered to be working days. When you're thinking about around Christmas, where there's a number of holidays, if you leave these unclicked, then your system will expect people to be ordering and delivering on New Year's Day or Christmas. So you want to make sure these are checked and you actually have a calendar set up under Administration General Settings. Ignore cumulative lead time allows you to make the decision that if you've got nested items in production, that you ignore that and order the items that's based on the lead time for that particular item. What this does is if you have items with particularly long lead times, then your orders are going to come back for example, let's say we've got something with 60-day lead time, which then is used to create something else with a 60-day lead time. Then there's 120-day lead time. If you ignore that, then both will be considered 60-day lead times. It's if you've got items in stock, then that will make sure that your stock stays replenished. And then we've got our sort by for reviewing item numbers, item groups, etc. You can display items with no requirements, which will give you a list of your entire inventory and show you what is and is not being loaded. So we don't have a large inventory, so let's do that. And then a simulation means that when you run this, it's not actually allow you to create any orders. So in this case, it's going to select all items. However, I can decide to do selection of items, in which case I can say I want to look at only my printers. Or groups or properties. Here you can decide whether you want to do it by company, which will consolidate all warehouses, or if you want each warehouse to have its own minimum requirements. Here we have our data sources. You can decide whether you want to have planning horizon to include historical data, or just go with your plan. These are documents that you will consider: purchase orders, purchase agreements, sales orders, production orders, recurring orders, inventory transfers. You can also choose to restrict. You can restrict certain documents or business partners, etc. if for purchase orders, sales orders, etc. So let's go back to our PowerPoint. Gotten ahead of ourselves. Okay, so the planning horizon describes whether a report is run daily, weekly, or some other period. It also specifies how many non-working days. We looked at that. Our printers might have 30-day planning horizon that would analyze all demands for that period. And MRP is run, it would calculate the production and purchase orders needed for all items, including the bills of materials. You can save the scenario and use it again. You don't have to. So using existing scenario, we've gone through all of these items. Data sources. The data source window specifies the types of documents that are used to calculate the demand for product. The data that you can enter is input from the data sources for material requirement plannings that come from purchase orders and reserve invoices, sales orders and reserve sales orders, forecasts, inventory, open production orders. Parent dependency requirements. These are requirements for children items or parent items that get created from bills and materials. Planning data. The data coming from the master record, which is maintained. Planning tab, which includes lead times, etc. And bill of materials. Information about the parent items and the quantities. The data you get as output from the MRP are recommendations for production orders and purchase orders depending on the procurement method maintained in the item master record. So that's where we said whether we want to buy or make. Tip, make sure you choose only relevant warehouses in this step if you've got a lot of warehouses. So here's our graphic. Sales orders, purchase orders, forecasts, all of these different types of materials will ultimately result in a production order and purchase orders. So let's click Run, and we can see by clicking this arrow, you can actually see what the factors are that go into making this decision. Now I actually chose printers, which is probably a poor decision because all of them have a high inventory on hand. So you can see here that we've got initial inventory of 1,024. Click on here, you can actually see what creates that demand, and I've got a sales order for 10. Let's just create a sales order. Do 1,500. That. And then we go back to here. It didn't pick that up. You actually have to restart the wizard in order to have it pick that up. So the results, the window displays the rows, every item for every date. Actually, need to see that. Sorry, I'm running a bit late here. Let's cancel this one. MRP for one more I know that we've got. I'm going to select that scenario. So in this case, we can see the red saying that I need 40 by this date based on lead times, because if you recall, the grandchild had a 2-day lead time for this item. And it needs to be in by the 28th, but in order to fulfill that, it has to come in on the 26th, and at the lead time of 2 days, it's not going to be able to make it in, so that shows up as red. For the items that do, we have a quantity of 20 for production, and we have a printer here that we can see now. We need to order 489, and the reason for that is that we now have an existing order for 1,500 right there. So with the MRP, you can see what the recommendations are and where you're going to be lacking. So this is what the recommendations would be. This is the analysis behind how we make those recommendations, and then the recommendations here would be 3 purchase requests, and 2 production orders for child items. But these ones are going to be past due. So it alerts you that these are going to be past due, and you then have to make a decision on whether you want to contact the customer and move this date out, or to try and get in touch with the supplier and get a rush order in or pull it in from another supplier. So these just alert you that you're going to have problems and action has to be taken. And then if we hit finish, you've seen our recommendations. So this which talks about looking at our recommendations, pale gray or inactive cells define the period when no activity takes place. That would be covered by lead times, etc. Or sorry, that's the pale gray. The dark gray defines dead periods, which is lead times that are too long, etc. Value in the cells appear in red indicate that they have extended or extends the due date. To display pegging information, choose quantity. So that's where we take a look at the information on what was ordered, etc. We can click on these little boxes, which we've already gone through. We've taken a look at the order recommendation report, and from here you can make changes to the vendor. If you decide to change the vendor, you can make changes to the quantities. You can also change orders or inventory from one warehouse to another, change the schedule, or delete recommendations. So we can go to order recommendations. Demo test. So we did save the order recommendations, and we can see here the vendor. Now in this case, we don't have a default vendor code, so we're going to have to manually put those in. That would be based on the item. If you don't have a default vendor code for the item, then you're going to have to manually enter the item codes, as well as prices, etc. So how about price of that? You can also enter discounts, which warehouse you want to put it to, etc. Now in this case, I'm going to create a production order and 2 purchase orders. You don't have to select everything. You can choose whatever you like. I've got a problem with that one, so let's go back to record from items. There we are. Sorry, there was a problem with the MRP setup. And so what that has done now is it's created a purchase order. And if we go into purchase orders here, purchase request. Sorry, let's switch to purchase order. Oh, we've got it set up so that it requires approval. Which we won't go through right now. But the net result is that a new purchase order will be created, a purchase recommendation. So we've just gone through this order consolidation, an efficient use of MRP has the ability to consolidate purchase orders so the quantities are purchased in amounts that ensure the highest discount. For example, if a significant discount is were available for memory boards when they are ordered in lots of 100, the MRP functionality would consolidate any needed orders for any memory boards up to an order amount of 100 to maximize the discounts. The terms that are described for purchase orders that should be consolidated are set up in your MRP order recommendations form settings tab. So here's an example where we've got two orders, one for 60, one for 40, and they will all be consolidated in a single purchase order for a quantity of 100. So the key points with MRP, we've defined planning data, run the MRP, gave the recommendations, and then created purchase orders and production orders. The key master data used in MRP is items and bill of material, and a crucial factor for MRP is properly setting up the MRP lead times in the item master. So that ends our inventory for the inventory series, where we've covered inventory basics, set up the master data, items managed in batches, inventory management, pick and pack, create price lists earlier today, and then finally run MRP. So that ends the inventory series. Thank you very much.
All right, that's the last of the 4 inventory sections we've had to do. For the core session, there's going to be a new series starting next week. Actually, unprepared, didn't check to see which one is going on, but I believe Carl's going to be hosting again, and I think Naz might be the presenter next week. Don't quote me on that. It's all up on the website, the SharePoint for Vision 33. And you guys can go up and take a look at that calendar in advance and make sure that you guys can attend the ones that you want to get involved in. I'd like to thank Gregory for both today and presenting the last 3 sessions besides today's 2 on this inventory session. And thanks, Gregory. And
You're welcome.
I guess we'll see you later in the year with some other sessions. I'm not sure.
That's
But
right.
guys, if you have any questions pertaining to what went on today or any more in-depth look at what you guys have individually, go ahead and use the support@vision-33.com email to ask us your questions, and we'll make sure that we get back to you with answers. So until next week, thanks, and I appreciate all you guys attending.